Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank everyone for being here today. We have a full afternoon, so I'm trying to start us on time, and I'll do my best to keep us on time. But we're here today to better understand what has happened at the National Institutes of Health since the very start of this administration, and what it means for life-saving research and for the treatments and cures that millions of Americans are counting on. I will introduce our 5 panelists shortly and want to focus our time on hearing directly from them. We are hearing from researchers, research institutions, and patients about the ongoing attacks on NIH. Understandably, most are reluctant to publicly speak out because the Trump administration is actively extorting institutions of all types, including major research universities. Fear of speaking out is only the beginning of the story. This administration is seeking to dismantle the NIH and destroy the hopes of millions of Americans who are counting on life-saving treatments and cures. The NIH is the global leader in biomedical research. NIH-funded research contributed to 354 out of the 356 drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration between 2010 and 2019. Simply put, without the NIH, there would be no cancer immunotherapy, no anti-overdose medications, no cutting-edge treatments. NIH research drives our economy at the national and local levels by supporting thousands of jobs in every state. More than 83% of NIH's budget goes to more than 300,000 research personnel at over 3,000 universities, medical schools, and other research institutions. And it pays off. Local communities see $2.56 of economic activity for every $1 invested in this research. Look, we can all agree that government should be more efficient. But here is where I disagree with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Cures for Alzheimer's disease and cancer are not waste or fraud or abuse. The slash and burn approach at NIH isn't being led by scientists or anyone who knows the first thing about biomedical research. It is being led by Elon Musk's DOGE, which has arbitrarily cut funding without consideration for the effects on research and patients. President Trump and Elon Musk's DOGE are callously ripping away treatments and cures from millions of Americans suffering from Alzheimer's disease, cancer, ALS, and other devastating diseases. And we are here today to sound the alarm. On only his second day in office, President Trump's administration paused all public communications by the Department of Health and Human Services. This gag order threw sand in the gears of the NIH grant-making process, stopping the very meetings that greenlight funding for research and clinical trials for all types of diseases. It means potential treatments and cures are delayed if they are discovered at all. In just 2 months, the Trump administration has stopped the release of $1.7 billion in funding to begin or to continue research. Biomedical research can't just be turned on and off on a whim. These delays aren't just debilitating for scientists, but they also undermine everything from Alzheimer's research to cancer and rare diseases. President Trump also tried to illegally stop all federal grant funding. While they were quickly blocked by the courts, these actions created chaos and confusion. For 10 days in February, NIH didn't issue a single grant award, which is unheard of for the agency that typically awards 60,000 grants per year. The administration has canceled more than 300 NIH grants so far, with the promise of terminating more each week. That's 300 opportunities for cutting-edge research and life-saving cures stopped short. The Trump administration also fired more than 1,000 NIH scientists and grant administrators and forced out career scientific leadership. Firing grant managers will mean even more delays in getting funding out the door. Firing scientists will mean that it will take even longer to find cures to diseases that plague Americans. Terminating early career training programs means fewer promising scientists to make groundbreaking medical breakthroughs, treatments, and cures. We have heard heartbreaking stories from patients in clinical trials, often someone's final hope of curing a disease, who are worried that their access to cutting-edge, life-saving treatment will be cut off because of heartless cuts President Trump and Elon Musk's DOGE are making to NIH. This isn't efficiency. This is cruelty. Finally, the administration also attempted to illegally cut the funding that supports biomedical research infrastructure and clinical trials at institutions across the country. These resources, commonly called indirect costs, are literally keeping the lights on in labs. And without them, these laboratories could not operate. In my home state of Wisconsin, it would cut $65 million from research institutions. Our neighboring state of Iowa would have had more than $33 million slashed from their biomedical research enterprise. I have made it clear as the ranking member on the Senate Appropriations Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee that such a cap is a blatant violation of current law and will halt research, plain and simple. And I would be remiss if I did not point out the why. Ripping the rug from under cancer, Alzheimer's, and ALS patients is all in service of finding the money that Elon Musk and Donald Trump need to cut taxes for themselves and other billionaires like them and large profitable corporations. Yes, cutting cancer cures for corporate tax breaks. Look, we just voted on the very person to lead the NIH yesterday, and this forum could not be more timely. So far, Dr. Bhattacharya has shown that he will only be a rubber stamp for Elon Musk and Donald Trump's efforts to gut NIH research and throw hope for too many Americans by the wayside. Today, we are here to show what this reckless approach will mean for people fighting these devastating diseases. In a moment, I will introduce our panelists, but first I will turn it over to Senator Welch for his opening remarks.
Well, I just want to express my gratitude to each of you who have committed your professional lives to finding cures and advocating for people with serious diseases. That's under attack, and Senator Baldwin said it very well. It's a upside down set of priorities where you are going through the federal budget and finding ways to pay for a tax cut that goes to the wealthiest Americans who are doing pretty well. And food stamps are going to likely cut healthcare, Medicaid, and scientific research. And the sadness to me, I mean, the cruelty of it, as Senator Baldwin said, speaks for itself. But it's a lack of confidence in a nation. You know, a confident nation faces its challenges. And a challenge is finding cures for disease. The confident nation commits the talents of its people to doing hard, original research where you don't know whether you'll be successful, but you know the effort in trying to be successful is worth it. And this is an erosion of our own spirit if we allow this really wrong-headed, upside-down approach to how we use our resources, but more importantly, how we use the talents of people in this country who want to use those talents they have for the betterment of the citizens that they live with. So thank you, and Senator Baldwin, I really appreciate your opening statement and appreciate your leadership on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Welch. We are expecting Leader Schumer to drop by. I will interrupt after a witness has concluded their remarks to allow him to say a few words of welcome and introduction. But I'm going to briefly introduce each of our panelists and invite each to give your opening comments before you take questions. Dr. Monica Bertagnoli is the former director of the National Institutes for Health, and we are so delighted to have you here today. Dr. Sterling Johnson is the associate director of Wisconsin's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Whitney Wharton is a clinical researcher focusing on Alzheimer's disease at Emory University. Dr. Larry Salzman is a retired physician living with leukemia and the former executive research director for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And Dr. Jesse Yarbrough, I just completely botched your last name, you'll correct me in a moment, but is a veteran living with ALS and Board of Trustees member for the ALS Association. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and Dr. Bertagnoli, you may deliver your opening remarks.
Ranking Member Baldwin, Senator Welch, and Klobuchar, and also distinguished members of the Senate, thank you for allowing me to speak at such a critical time for our nation. I am Monica Bertagnoli, a surgeon and cancer researcher who served as the 17th director of the National Institutes of Health. I've had a full spectrum medical career. As a surgeon, I cared for patients with cancer. I conducted research to identify better ways to diagnose, treat, and prevent cancer, and led programs to educate the next generation of doctors and researchers. Most recently, I was a public servant responsible for overseeing how precious taxpayer dollars were used to improve health. But I think my most relevant role is that I am a cancer survivor. I would not be here today, healthy and thriving, without the research funded by NIH over the past 5 decades. So I also represent the many millions of people throughout our nation who have directly benefited, even owe their lives, to biomedical research funded by the NIH. I resigned my post as NIH director in January of this year, and since then, I've had no insight into how decisions are being made by our current leaders at HHS. I can speak, however, about the downstream effects of their decisions and some irreparable damage that their policies are producing. To date, more than 300 grants terminated, about $1.5 billion in funding delays and barriers that are preventing NIH's role of ensuring that funding is delivered to outstanding researchers across the nation. I recently met with a young researcher affected by the current funding delays. He's not that young. He's 35 years old and I know, I agree. He's 35 years old and just starting out After completing college, medical school, PhD in molecular biology, a residency in internal medicine, and specialty training in oncology. His mother died of pancreatic cancer, and he wants to treat people with this deadly disease and conduct research to develop ways to prevent it. He trained for 16 years after high school in the best programs in the country, the only places where the kind of care and research he has trained for are done. And because of hiring freezes and the research funding that has been stopped, he can't get a job. Academic medical centers across the nation cannot hire him. What will he do? He might seek a job in private industry, but this won't allow him to treat patients and will take away his chance to pursue the fundamental research toward his goal of preventing the disease that took his mother. He might move to another country. This is not an isolated story at all. There are so many other damaging effects from funding cuts and delays, and the current situation, even if temporary, is producing irreparable harm, especially to those of the next generation, and not just in a few targeted research areas. We're losing the promising future work of this doctor and also those who might replace him. Because how can we ask a young person who needs a career to sustain them to undertake the years of study required when the future is so uncertain? Our country's investment in biomedical research has fueled tremendous progress. Consider the two biggest causes of death in our country: cardiovascular disease and cancer. Since I began my own career, the age-adjusted death rate from cancer in the US fell by 34%. That means 4.5 million people who would have died from cancer survived due to NIH-funded advances in treatment, early detection, and prevention. Death rates due to heart attacks and strokes also fell about 30% during this time. This progress would not have happened without taxpayer support. The same support also fueled our economy. In 2024, every $1 of NIH funded generated an estimated $2.56 in economic activity, but that totals to $94 billion for our economy. This funding produced over 400,000 jobs nationwide and fueled local economies through spending on research-related goods, services, and salaries. Today, we are just beginning to see progress against devastating diseases which have long been hopeless: Alzheimer's disease, ALS, diabetes, even pancreatic cancer, all because of NIH funding. And this has proven to be a great investment for American taxpayers, producing both extraordinary improvements in health and significant profits for our nation's economy. How can we afford to see this progress stalled? Overall, the loss to our nation on so many levels will be way too great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bertagnolli. I'm just going to explain, there's a vote on the Senate floor, which means we are going to not pause, but rotate. So, Dr. Johnson, I hate to say I'm going to run first as you give your testimony, but thank you so much for being here, and I would now recognize Dr. Johnson, and Senator Welch will chair until I return.
Go ahead. Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Baldwin, or thank you, Senator Baldwin, for inviting me here today, and all the distinguished senators here. I'm honored to be here today representing the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. My name's Sterling Johnson. I'm a professor there at UW, where I study diseases of the brain, such as Alzheimer's disease. I'm here to emphasize the critical importance of NIH funding in the fight against Alzheimer's, a disease that is one of our greatest public health and economic challenges. Over 6.9 million Americans live with Alzheimer's today, a number that will double by 2050 without effective solutions. Thanks to NIH support, our field has made game-changing advances. 2 decades ago, we had no accurate way to diagnose Alzheimer's other than clinical judgment. The definitive diagnosis was made after a person passed away, by looking at their brain under a microscope. Today, we can detect the disease using brain imaging scans and new blood tests that identify the abnormal proteins driving the disease. These tools were developed and validated in large part with NIH funding. And then they were used in clinical trials that led to the first generation of FDA-approved treatments that robustly remove the amyloid plaques from the brain and slow down the symptoms. These biomarker tests also revealed something profound. Alzheimer's begins years, if not decades, before the signs of memory loss. That insight was gained because NIH-funded longitudinal studies existed to draw upon. And that insight has now been the basis for launching major NIH-funded prevention trials. Just last week, an exciting study reported that extending the treatment with an experimental therapy in a prevention setting in cognitively healthy individuals who had an autosomal dominant gene for the disease, it prevented their progression by 50%.
Wow.
That was an extraordinary breakthrough and NIH funded. At the University of Wisconsin, where I do research, NIH grants support a range of essential programs. I'll briefly highlight two. The Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center is part of a nationwide network that functions as a consortium and provides data to the world as well as local infrastructure to scientists. These centers create efficiency by enabling scientists to do more definitive studies with center resources than what they could do on their own in their own individual labs. We also participate in prevention trials and also an important study called the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, whose data have been used freely thousands of times by researchers all over the world, including in partnership with Big Pharma, who use these data to plan the next generation of clinical trials. These are just some of the examples of the many programs at our universities that are being conducted in a coordinated way with NIH involvement and oversight. These discoveries are changing the way we diagnose and treat Alzheimer's and related causes of dementia. But now we need to talk about how to sustain these hard-fought, substantive gains. Over the last few months, I've seen cause for concern. There are delays in peer review and funding processes for some projects and centers. There are proposed cuts that threaten major ongoing studies, including treatment trials, risking the loss of millions of dollars already invested and setting our patients back. On top of this, the growing uncertainty is discouraging early career scientists from staying in the field, undermining the future of our biomedical workforce. If these cuts go into effect, studies will be delayed and slowed. We will lose ground on hard-won progress. Every setback costs lives and quality of life and increases the already staggering $360 billion annual cost of Alzheimer's healthcare.
Wow.
Back in 2011, the National Alzheimer's Project Act set a bold stretch goal to prevent and effectively treat Alzheimer's by 2025. Well, it's 2025. We've made extraordinary gains, approved therapies that remove the plaques from the brain, accurate diagnostic tools, stronger understanding of the disease biology. NIH has overseen and closely coordinated all of this highly successful national response, but we have more to do. Ranking Member Baldwin, and Senator Welch and others here, the progress of the past 2 decades has been nothing short of remarkable, thanks in part to the bipartisan support. Our patients who have this progressive disease don't have the luxury of time to shoulder these unnecessary delays and cuts that we are currently experiencing. The clock is ticking for them and their families. Now more than ever, we need the continued full resolve and commitment of the federal government to meet their need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring. Dr. Wharton.
Thank you so much, Senator Welch, and distinguished members of the Senate. My name is Dr. Whitney Wharton, and I am a cognitive neuroscientist. The focus of my research is Alzheimer's disease prevention, specifically identifying mechanisms contributing to Alzheimer's disease, like vascular risk factors and inflammatory markers in blood and in spinal fluid among individuals who are at the highest risk for Alzheimer's disease. My research has been funded by the NIH for 18 years through postdoctoral and career development awards, as well as R-level research grants for high-risk, high-reward, and independent research projects. I conduct observational studies and clinical trials, all of which enroll participants from under-resourced groups, including women, Black Americans, the LGBTQIA+ community, and individuals with a family history of Alzheimer's disease. I'm an associate professor at Emory University, and my remarks here today represent my own views and not necessarily those of my employer. I'm here today as a scientist who has had 2 NIH grants abruptly terminated in the past month. On February 28th, my first NIH grant was terminated, which only had 6 months remaining on a 4-year award. My terminated projects were scientifically sound, supported by strong pilot data, underwent rigorous peer review, and were developed in response to a specific NIH initiative. Specifically, the funding announcement at the time read, and I quote, "Diversity among research participants broadens scope and improves the generalizability of scientific investigations. Classification of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, sex, and gender are multifactorial and dynamic in their influence on disease state, warranting their abundant representation in research." While these terminations are devastating for myself and my team, particularly the junior faculty and students, my primary concern is for the patients, the research participants, the families who are already being impacted by NIH's radical shift in funding priorities. These funding cuts are already having real-world impacts. Most of my research participants are adults with a parent with Alzheimer's disease. I'll call one of them Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith's mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 6 years ago. Mrs. Smith was forced to quit her job to take care of her mother full-time. She moved into her mother's house a year ago, where she still sleeps on the couch, which is situated close to the front door because her mother wanders at night. In her free time, Mrs. Smith chooses to be a research participant because she wants desperately to help her mother, because she's scared that she knows she is also at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. However, what scares her most is that her eldest daughter is going to have to care for her the same way that Mrs. Smith cares for her own mother. Mrs. Smith was supposed to have a research study visit with me next week, and news that this project is canceled is going to devastate her. Research involving participants and patients cannot take place without trust. Building and retaining a group of patients and participants who donate their time, their energy, and quite literally their body fluids, particularly when they have or are at risk for a terminal illness, is a gift, and the only way that we can ensure effective treatments and prevention strategies in the future. Furthermore, research participants should be representative of the individuals most likely to have a particular condition. And research shows that Alzheimer's disease is more prevalent in women, racial and ethnic minorities, and the LGBTQIA+ community, in addition to people of lower SES and rural Black Americans and white individuals. Termination of my peer-reviewed grants and hundreds of others, which were awarded based on merit, has potentially devastating implications for all Americans. It sets a concerning precedent where scientific inquiry and peer-reviewed and awarded projects are turned off and on based on a changing set of priorities. Not only can this cause confusion, but it also impacts the pipeline of new and talented young investigators and erases entire communities of patients who are most impacted by diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Leader Schumer has joined us, and of course, he is leading our effort to stand up for scientific research at the NIH. And Leader Schumer, you have before you an extraordinary group of talented people who've committed their lives to the betterment of our lives. So I appreciate you being here, and we all do. So I want to allow you to make some comments and express your concern about protecting scientific research and health for all of our Americans. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter, and I want to thank you and Senator Baldwin for having this spotlight hearing. It's so important that we let people know what's happening, because lives of probably hundreds of millions of Americans, not just tens of millions, are affected by the kind of research that NIH has done. And let me just say, New York is a center of that research. We have so many dedicated people doing great things and saving people's lives. It's just vital. And the fact that they want to cut NIH is just appalling, just appalling. It was brought home to me when I went and visited Cold Spring Harbor Lab out in Long Island. And there I met a 12-year-old girl named Emma Larson. Emma Larson had a rare spinal disease that thousands of little babies are born with. And in the past, they were probably given 2 or 3 years to live. But there was Emma, 12 years old. She was in a wheelchair because they caught it a little late. But she was in school. She had a 4.0 average. She had friends. She had play dates and all that other stuff. Why? Because an NIH grant at Cold Spring Harbor Lab found the cure to this disease. And there are tens of thousands of children and hundreds of thousands of families of those children who now have beautiful lives with their children because of NIH. This never would have happened without the NIH grant. And as I sat there and feeling so nice about Emma, and she was my guest at one of my guests at the State of the Union address that the president gave, and I thought, why are they doing this? And there's only one reason, folks: tax cuts for billionaires. That's what they want. And they're cutting everything. Today we talked about Social Security, we've talked about Medicaid, we've talked about, you name it, up and down the board, funding to feed children. It's just appalling. And they come up with this bogus stuff. If I was back in Brooklyn, I'd use a sharper word. They say indirect costs. Well, first of all, if you talk at some of the great university hospitals in New York or Massachusetts or Wisconsin, indirect costs end up being 50, 60%. Because what do they mean by indirect costs? They make you think it's some kind of waste. It is buildings, it is electricity, it is water, it is often machinery like microscopes, you know, these high-powered microscopes. It's a bunch of bull that these are indirect costs that are unnecessary and you cut them and nothing bad will happen. It'll shut down the whole enterprise. And we're making progress. Why are we living longer? You know, one of God's greatest gifts to us is life. And when I was a little boy, I had a great-grandmother who was 82. She'd come to my house every Wednesday, and she was on a walker, and she'd sit in a little chair in the kitchen. And all the kids in the neighborhood would ride their bicycles over to my house, come to the back, push their head against the kitchen window, come to Schumer's house, see the oldest lady in the world, because she was 82. You know, that was 50 years ago. Why is 82 not such an old age anymore? Why is life expectancy? In good part because of the NIH. What makes these people think we want to stop that research, which could, you know, reduce death rates from cancer and maybe find a cure to Alzheimer's or ALS, which my uncle passed away from. And it's just absurd. So I want to assure you, I want to assure the entire research community in New York, and by the way, it's not just doctors, it's a lot of technicians and lab people and people who sweep the floors late at night. I suppose they're a extra cost, people who keep the place clean, that we are going to fight this tooth and nail. We always, in the past, had bipartisan support for NIH. In fact, a Republican senator, he later turned Democrat, he saw the error of his ways, Arlen Specter, was probably the leader, was the leading fighter for this. And how this Republican Party, I hate to be a bit partisan here, but we have to be. We're having this hearing because they don't want to hear you testify in a regular hearing. But how it's so changed that even something as sacred, as beautiful, as non-controversial as NIH grants seems to be something they want to eliminate, cut, slash, render ineffective. But we are going to fight it tooth and nail. And let me tell you something, the public is on our side. As has been said, public sentiment is everything. I urge every one of you to let everyone you know who works in your institutions and their families and friends what is happening, because we must win this fight. People's lives are at stake. Beautiful Emma and the millions and millions of people like her who are living good lives because of the research you've done is at stake. So thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Join us in this fight. It has to be on this side of the table and that side of the table. And if together we fight, we stay united, we don't give up, we will win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leader.
I want to thank, she was out of the room, but Senator Baldwin has been such a leader on this issue. We are so lucky to have her here on the Help Committee. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Larry Salzman. Thank you so much for being here, and please provide us with your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin and Senator Welsh and Senator Schumer, members of the forum. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you at this critical time. I'm deeply grateful that you're holding this important discussion and shining a light on the very real consequences of undermining research that so many Americans depend on. It means a great deal to be able to share my story with you today. My name is Dr. Larry Salzman. I'm a former family physician, a former healthcare IT entrepreneur, and a patient advocate, and a 15-year survivor of chronic lymphocytic leukemia and small cell lymphocytic lymphoma. I'm also a grateful participant in 6 clinical trials, and perhaps most remarkably, a man who survived 10 relapses, 2 CAR T-cell therapies, an allogeneic bone marrow transplant, and more than a dozen different treatments. In every one of those phases, NIH-funded research has played a critical role in keeping me alive. When I was diagnosed in 2010, my physicians told me I could expect to live another 5 to 8 years. That kind of estimate is something patients with cancer know all too well, the quote, expiration date. At the time, it didn't feel real, but I quickly learned that living with a diagnosis like mine means constantly building bridges from one treatment to the next, hoping each one holds long enough for research to catch up with my disease. Because of research made possible by the NIH, I've crossed many of those bridges. And I'm here today, 15 years later, because scientists built them in time and allowed me to outpace the cancer. Because my disease kept changing, I needed treatments that hadn't yet been approved, so I enrolled in clinical trials, 6 in total. 4 of those therapies are now FDA approved, and that's the pace we need, and the NIH support is what makes it possible. The current administration's threat to dramatically reduce or delay NIH funding from many of the most talented researchers and clinicians in the United States represents a crushing blow, not only to the development of future cancer therapies, but to all of medical research. The uncertainty is already making it harder for researchers to plan, collaborate, and deliver the breakthroughs patients urgently need. For patients waiting on the next treatment, time is everything. These cuts could rob us of the time we most need. Even with every advantage, my background in medicine, a national network of expert clinicians, and the financial resources to access clinical trials, surviving this disease was never easy. But most patients don't have those advantages. And without NIH support, many simply cannot afford to participate in clinical trials, even when it may be their last hope. For them, NIH funding is the difference between a chance and no chance. I speak here today not only for myself, but for every patient who has ever held out hope that research would buy them another year or another decade. Without robust, sustained, and predictable funding from the NIH, those bridges to the next treatment won't be there when the patients need them. The bridge that saved me was built through decades of investment, innovation, and relentless commitment from our nation's scientific community, but those bridges do not build themselves. I am living proof of what NIH research can do, and I don't think I would be here today without the commitment that Congress has shown by prioritizing NIH funding over the past many decades. I ask you to protect this funding so that more people can outlive their expiration dates. I'm proud to have shared my story through the American Association for Cancer Research, which continues to play a leading role in advocating for strong, sustained investment in biomedical research. The recent statement responding to the administration's actions adequately reflects what so many in the scientific and patient communities are feeling right now, that we must speak out, stand up for science, and protect the future of medical progress. Thank you again for giving me the chance to share what that progress has meant in my life. I don't take a single day of it for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saltzman. Next, I want to introduce for his opening remarks Mr. Jesse Ibarra, who I understand has a message from your 10-year-old son that you'd like to share with us to begin with.
Good morning. I'm not a doctor. Thank you, Senator Baldwin, Senator Welch. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jesse Ibarra. I'm a father, a grandfather, and a military veteran from San Diego. I am also a person living with ALS. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a neurodegenerative disease that takes away a person's ability to walk, talk, feed themselves, and eventually breathe. It's always fatal. The average survival time is 2 to 5 years. Current treatment options for ALS are extremely limited, and there is no cure yet. But we are getting close. For reasons still unknown, veterans like me are twice as likely to get the disease. I joined the Air Force willing to give my life for my country. I just didn't expect it would be through an illness I developed 30 years after I served. This is why I'm deeply concerned about the proposed cuts to federal funding for ALS research and how it would harm me and the 30,000 other Americans living with ALS who depend on the commitment of public research. The National Institutes of Health and other federal agencies have been critical in funding groundbreaking research that offers hope to the thousands of individuals like me, including by providing access to experimental treatments for ALS. The expanded access drug I am taking could not only extend my life, but could serve as a pathway to making ALS a livable disease. What people don't realize is that an ALS diagnosis effectively kills any future you thought you would have. After a year of feeling sorry for myself, I decided I would create a future to live into by planning things every month, 6 months, a year, and beyond. Access to this drug has truly given me a glimmer of hope and a possible future where I could see my 10-year-old son and granddaughter graduate high school and college, something I did not think was possible when I was first diagnosed. But now funding cuts and reductions to funding at NIH and other research agencies threaten to derail decades of progress right when we are at the tipping point of finally finding a cure and at the minimum making ALS a livable disease. But to be clear, this isn't just about me. It's about everyone impacted by ALS now and in the future. ALS costs our nation over $1 billion with a B dollars a year. Investing in a cure is not only fiscally responsible, but very simply good public policy. I urge Congress to reject these harmful cuts to NIH and support the funding necessary to make ALS a livable disease until we cure it. My life and others with neurodegenerative diseases and our economy depend on it. I would like to add to my statement some comments by my son in his own words. Sorry.
I am 10 NIH funding. Thank you for hearing my story today, and God bless everyone. Thank you.
No, that wasn't it. There we go.
That was good.
Senators, I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Dewey. I am 10 years old, and I'm on the autism spectrum. I would like to express why funds shouldn't be cut and
Sorry. I got it. Okay, you get the right one. And I'll hold it for you.
Senators, I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Dewey. I am 10 years old, and I'm on the autism spectrum. I would like to express why funds shouldn't be cut and why we need to keep funding to find a cure for ALS. One very important reason is to save the lives of our loved ones who suffer daily living with ALS. And my dad is one of the lives I need your help to save. I have goals and dreams to achieve that I need my dad by my side to show me and guide me along the way. My dad has a dream to at least see me graduate, and I need your help to make that happen. We can't do this without your help and support. The NIH can help my dad and many others live longer so we can have just a little more time to make memories with our loved ones. I am not ready to say goodbye to my best friend, my dad. I need your help to save lives and make a difference for our ALS pals. My mom says it only takes one person to make a difference in someone else's life, and I want to make a difference and be my dad's hero like he has been mine. But I can't do this without the support of everyone in this room. Please be a part of my team to keep my father alive. Please keep supporting the NIH funding. Thank you for hearing my story today, and God bless everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin and Senator Welch for your commitment and support to these critical issues. I am so grateful to have people like you fighting so hard for everyone facing diseases that the NIH is trying to cure. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. I just have to thank all the panelists here. So appreciate you coming to join us today. And I want to thank both Senators Baldwin and Welch for facilitating this important forum. As we all know, and that's one of the reasons why we are here to shine a light on what is happening, the National Institutes of Health, it's under attack by this administration. I hear it in my state of Nevada. I hear it here through the halls of Washington. Every time I meet with groups coming into my office, this is the one thing I hear. Adding to that chaos and confusion, President Trump and an unelected billionaire, Elon Musk, are sowing chaos, uncertainty throughout our nation. Let me just say, the impacts that we are seeing on NIH, it doesn't matter whether you're a red state or a blue state. This isn't about party politics. It's exactly what we heard. This is about saving lives. This is about finding a cure. And I don't think you have to be touched by somebody who either lost their life to a rare disease or has extended their life to be able to support NIH and what we are trying to achieve here and what I think is one of the most important things. Let me just say this. I know in Nevada in fiscal year 2024, NIH awarded grants and contracts to work in Nevada that directly supported 890 jobs, adding nearly 200 million to our economy. I have heard directly from Nevadans who have rare diseases like sickle cell disease, which impacts about 1,000 people in Nevada. What they have told me and what you all know is that because of the NIH research, we now have gene therapy to help treat that disease, among other things. And cutting NIH's research funding will set us back, and it will leave 30 million Americans with thousands of different rare diseases behind. Here's the other thing I know. We have two universities, UNLV in Nevada and University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And they are recipients. We have two medical schools there. Both of these universities are R1 research universities, among the top schools for medical research in the country. And that research is heavily supported by grants from NIH, which goes towards innovations in curing cancer, cardiovascular science, brain health, and other critical areas. What this administration is doing in gutting NIH will jeopardize those gains. UNR and UNLV are at risk of losing millions of dollars. I've already heard from UNLV. You have nearly $4 million in awards from NIH that have been terminated. I can't stress this enough. The reason why we are here is what we just heard and what all of you know. This is about saving lives. This is trying to identify the rare diseases, what is happening in healthcare in this country, and saving lives and bringing cures and helping families who want an opportunity to achieve. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my first cousin, who passed away at the age of 58 from cancer. She passed away 2 years ago. And she fought like hell. And she was a nurse, and she wanted to stay alive long enough so that she could see her first grandchild born. She passed away March 27th. Her first grandchild was born March 29th. I am named after my grandmother, who unfortunately later on in life died from Alzheimer's disease. It touches so many of us. And that's what this is about. And, you know, and it's so frustrating to me that I see here in Washington too many people making decisions without understanding the real life implications and what is going on out there in this country, not just inside this beltway based on data and numbers, but what is actually happening in real life to our families, to our loved ones, to individuals. And this is about saving lives. So I cannot thank you enough for being here. I've got one quick question. I know I'm running out of time, but let me ask this to Dr. Wharton. In light of the changes that the administration is making, I'm curious, how are researchers adapting? How are they responding to this uncertainty and chaos, and what should we know?
Thank you so much for the question. Senator, one of my very favorite people in the whole world and a researcher that I respect so very much, a junior investigator, is from UNLV. His name's Jason Flatt. And he has lost a lot of, he has lost now 4 research grants. And that is because his grants, while they're under the Alzheimer's umbrella, focus specifically on the LGBTQIA community. So it's people like that that I'm very, very concerned about. I don't know exactly, it's a very difficult time. The communication pipeline is stifled. It's shut down between investigators, between us and the NIH. So the NIH is, we don't know what to do necessarily because we don't know what grants are going to be terminated. A lot of us just receive, a letter saying effective immediately. It's just a stop work order. The letters are also pretty terrible in language. So what we're doing.
Ask in language in what way? I'd be curious.
I actually have my example from one of my NIH grants that was cut. So my termination letter, which I received on February 28th, was as follows, and I quote, "This award no longer upholds agency priorities. NIH is obligated to carefully steward grants toward carefully steward grant awards to ensure taxpayer dollars are used in ways to benefit the American people and improve their quality of life. Your project does not satisfy these criteria." It then says, it cites transgender issues, and it says, quote, "Research programs based on gender identity are often unscientific, have little identifiable return on investment, and do nothing to enhance the health of many Americans. Many such studies ignore rather than seriously examine biological realities. It is a policy of NIH not to prioritize these research programs."
And just to be clear, nobody came to talk to you. Nobody came to see your research. Nobody came in to observe anything that was going on. You just got this letter from somebody out of Washington, and that was it.
Exactly. I got this letter along with Dr. Flatt and a handful of other investigators the same night, on a Friday night. Seems to be when they sometimes come out. Yes.
Thank you. I don't want to take up any more time. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Senator Murray.
Thank you so much for doing this today. And I want to thank all of our panelists and everybody who's at our backs expressing the anger, as I do today, about Donald Trump and Elon Musk tossing life-saving research into the shredder. This is outrageous. It is outrageous how they are treating our researchers, the research they're doing, and the tremendous benefits that are going to be lost because we've got 2 billionaires who aren't thinking about what they're doing. They're looking at a word on a piece of paper called DEI and deciding, oh, that must be it, without even knowing what they're doing. This is outrageous. We have DOJ freezing research grants mid-study. There is mass firing of researchers who are on the cutting edge of discovery. They're slashing funds for our world-class institutions. And they're setting back work on childhood cancers, on Alzheimer's disease, on improving women's health. There are patients today in clinical trials that are praying for a breakthrough, just like your son is. And they're seeing the best hope for a cure cut off by the richest 2 people in the world. This is just crazy. I have 4 NIH grants in my home state of Washington that have been canceled so far, including one that was focused on improving vaccine delivery for hospitalized children. There's countless other rewards that are being held up. They're threatening the life-saving research work that every single one of us either depend on today or may depend on or know somebody who depends on. I just can't express how outrageous this is. We know that in the first 4 weeks of this administration, NIH funding to research institutions was an astonishing $1 billion, that is a B, less than the same period last year. That is outrageous. Dr. Burton, great to see you again, and we so miss you there. Just tell us, from your time as NIH director, is it normal at this point in this year, we're almost the end of March, for so little grant funding to have gone out the door at NIH? And what is the impact on researchers and universities and people?
So thank you, Senator Murray. It's not at all normal. I want to say one thing, first of all, in defense of the wonderful people at NIH. There was not a day that when I served there, that the conversation wasn't about how can we do more for people? What is the best way to make sure that we're doing the most important cutting edge thing? I also want to, and that was the first ideas in their brain anytime they walked in the door. The second was, how do we support the next generation to make sure that the people we need are here for us? You know, the other thing I want to emphasize is that the fundamental research that we all need, the understanding the biology that our drug companies need to make drugs, or that our device makers need to be able to make better diagnoses, that's funded by the NIH, overwhelmingly. That's not funded by any other sector. So without NIH, we don't have any of these kinds of progress. That's what's not getting out the door. So 2 things to answer your question directly. First of all, the confusion is rampant. There is no, and at this time, we would have had fully a third of the total budget out the door already, funding very high-level research. It's an unbelievable brass ring to be an NIH-funded researcher, by the way. These are the best of the best of the best. And why am I saying only a third? Because we're a little more through the third of the year. It's because we're under a continuing resolution, and believe it or not, we always kind of start slow in a year like that because we want to make sure we're not going to, you know, break the budget. But if it were not for that, you know, we would be nearing the 50% point in getting all that money out the door, and I believe we are so far behind that right now.
We are far behind, and my understanding is 14 NIH grants focused on cancer have been terminated so far this year, and at least 6 of those focused on cancers impacting women. Dr. Burton Nogley, you're a surgical oncologist.
Yep.
How is this going to impact women?
Oh, it's, you know, the whole, we identified that women's health was a high priority area for us at NIH over the last year, and so launched many new programs to really begin to address the deficiencies that we've had in women's health.
So what's the deal? Women are part of whatever this DEI is thing, so now we're not, now
Well,
the direction from the Trump administration is we don't take care of women?
Well, nothing new is going forward that I can see. Nothing new. And the other issue, so women, big one, nothing new, meaning we identified this is an urgent need. Now we want to move forward, you know, with a robust response and confidence, and that is stalled. Another one, I'll give you very quickly, because this one is our underserved communities, underserved rural communities, like where I grew up. University of Utah, my alma mater, just had a clinical translational research award canceled in its second of 7 years, just terminated, CTSA award. This award, the aims are genetic testing to improve treatment and diagnosis of critically ill newborns, skin cancer reduction programs throughout rural communities, support young adults with heart disease to be able to live lives and be better connected to their doctors if they live in rural locations, and to identify genetic causes of bipolar disorder, canceled in its second year. So that's what we're seeing.
I mean, this is outrageous, and I would just have a word for Elon Musk and President Trump. Women are a part of your life too, and without them, you won't be where you are. So you better focus on their health and get these fundings, this research funding back in place. Thank you.
Thank you. So as ranking member on the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee, I've been raising the alarm about these harmful, illegal actions that the Trump administration has been taking against NIH research. And earlier this month, I raised the alarm and revealed that the Trump administration had halted $65 million in funding for 14 Alzheimer's disease research centers. Dr. Johnson, your center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison was not one of those 14 centers. However, if your center had have lost funding, what would have happened to your research and the center itself? And then I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay. The Alzheimer's centers are, they're the jewel in the crown of our nation's ability to respond to the problem of Alzheimer's disease. This is, we see 18,000 participants. We support scientists, we support projects, and we enable projects that the investigators couldn't do by themselves, or it would take them a lot longer to get those projects to fruition. So the centers bring critical efficiency, they bring expediency to this national mission for Alzheimer's disease. If a center gets cut, there's not only the prospect of laying off that talented workforce, but all of the dozens of grants and investigators at that institution are also vulnerable, who are relying on that center to conduct their research. So if this was, if we were to speculate about Wisconsin and having that happen there, it would dissolve our ability to have a consolidated and coherent response to this disease. It would affect our investigators. It would affect far more than just the center.
Thank you. So in addition to the impact that you just described, can you expand on just what the chaos and confusion of the last 2 months means for researchers across, across the research settings, and why it can be so debilitating for research into life-saving cures?
In this time of uncertainty and scarcity, institutions are now employing different strategies. There's hiring restrictions, there's spending restrictions. It's very difficult for us to hire the talented people that we need to hire and retain them. The workforce is going to not be as strong as it was before this happened. And so there's going to be delays. There's going to be delays in our ability to achieve our milestones on our grants because of the lack of a workforce. And there's going to be, this is going to affect our patients. If we cannot get to those answers that our research designs call for, then we don't get to those answers. And that is stopping progress. I will say these tactics, delays, layoffs, pulling of funding, I see these as short-term strategies that will very much balance a spreadsheet somewhere. But what's it going to do for the $360 billion annual health care bill that we have? I don't see the connection between these tactics and the solution that we're all looking for.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Next, we have Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to just say thank you to Senators Baldwin and Welch for hosting this forum today. It is a really valuable opportunity to showcase and uplift the life-saving work of NIH and really what's at stake from the Trump administration's reckless and illegal cuts to research funds. As you all well know, the NIH is in our backyard in Maryland, so we are especially proud of the work that is occurring there, and we feel the attacks and feel the impact on NIH very, very intimately. From DOGE slashing the NIH workforce to firing patriotic career civil servants and providers that maintain the hub of excellence, that is the NIH Clinical Center, to grants to Maryland researchers that have been canceled and funding frozen because they study vulnerable populations or healthcare disparities. We've also seen our research institutions like Johns Hopkins and schools in the University of Maryland system that stand to lose hundreds of millions of dollars if this administration's illegal indirect cost clawback scheme is allowed. An attack on the NIH is, in fact, an attack on the state of Maryland. on my constituents, 160,000 of whom are federal workers, and on our Maryland businesses who help to lead the field in pharmaceutical and medical device research, on our higher education institutions and health systems who drive innovation and research. And so I just have a few questions here. I want to just begin with Dr. Wharton and ask about, we've seen that researchers at the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins have seen their funding frozen or their grants even canceled because they may focus on clinical diversity or study health disparities. And so I would like for you, please, to just speak on the chilling effect that these broad and harmful policies will have on research, especially in academic settings.
Thank you, Senator, for that very important question. As I believe I mentioned earlier, Alzheimer's disease is overrepresented in minoritized groups, including racial and ethnic minorities, the LGBTQIA+ community. For example, my lab published a study a couple of years ago showing that Black Americans are 64% more likely than non-Hispanic whites to get Alzheimer's disease, and importantly, Black Americans are living longer with the disease. And the systematic elimination of these high-risk cohorts, particularly the longitudinal cohorts that Dr. Johnson was alluding to, will only serve to increase the total number of patients every year. And this is especially important because of the changing demography of our country, where racial and ethnic minorities are soon going to be the majority. We're making significant headway in earning the trust of these communities in our research studies, which until now has been an NIH priority. And this ensures that treatments and prevention strategies help as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And these terminations will have very grave consequences for patients, for families, for communities, and for taxpayers.
And, I'm curious as well. I am, like so many of my colleagues, we live out many of the issues that we advocate for. I'm a part of the sandwich generation, which means that I am not only raising a 19-year-old daughter, but supporting aging parents, a mother who has Alzheimer's. And so these issues are very front and center for me. One of the things that I believe I'm learning is that there also is a disparate impact on women in terms of Alzheimer's and diagnoses. And I wonder, can you speak to that just a little bit, and maybe just also how what we're seeing in terms of the moving away from really narrowing the research or picking out disparity in terms of various populations, how that will also affect women?
Absolutely. So women are more at risk for Alzheimer's disease compared to men. What we think is that there are two sort of buckets for risk. One is the lived experience of being a woman and things associated with that. So for instance, particularly for women in the sandwich generation, we are more likely to be caregivers, lifelong caregivers. We care for our children. We work full-time. We then care for our parents, so we are lifelong caregivers. With that caregiving, with those caregiving responsibilities comes, you're busy. You have increased levels of stress. Raising children is wonderful. There's also a very clear path to, we're able to rely on our communities, on our teachers, on our churches. The path is not so clear as it pertains to Alzheimer's disease. There's no clear path. Navigating the healthcare system, the legal system is very hard. So that in regard to women. And then second are the biological, potentially predisposition for women. A lot of times this happens when women go through the menopausal transition. So we think that it's related to estrogen levels, both systemically and in the brain. Women are at reduced risk for a number of cardiovascular risk factors until we hit menopause. And as soon as we hit menopause, our risk for certain diseases are equal to or greater than men. So there's a lot of research being devoted right now to the specific implications that sex hormones, particularly estrogen, has on brain structure, neurodegeneration, and things like that.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Smith.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so excited to see this panel, and I want to thank my colleagues, especially Senator Baldwin and Senator Welch, for doing this shadow hearing on an issue that's so important. And I'm going to focus my questions, Dr. Bertagnolli, I'm going to direct my questions your way, and I'm interested in focusing on the work that NIH does on research around mental illness and what impact these cuts could have. And my context for this is just last week, I was actually at an event with University of Minnesota researchers and also researchers from Hennepin Healthcare, which is the largest level 1 trauma center and teaching hospital and acute care hospital in the state, and along with NAMI. And we were really focusing in on the impact of these research grant cuts on mental, research into mental illness. And had an incredible young woman who had described her journey with psychosis and how her treatment had created like a whole new life for her, which I think so many people, when we think about getting a diagnosis of psychosis, you just have a sense of deep hopelessness. Yet, because of so much of the work that has been done on understanding better around treatments, early intervention, it was such a happy story. So I'm wondering if you could describe for us a bit of some of the research on mental illness that is being done at NIH and how this research is, kind of just give us an overview. And maybe I'm particularly concerned in what happens when these, if you are somebody who is in the middle of one of these studies and the money gets ripped away from you, what impact that has on you and your family when that, because it's your health care in that moment.
Microphone.
Because this illustrates one of the critical uses of NIH funding, which is to study vulnerable populations, really critically vulnerable populations. And the community of people who suffer from mental illness surely fit that. And the approach to this is always threefold. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of the disease. How did they get there in the first place? That can really help with developing drugs and new treatments and new approaches. But for mental illness, it's also the communities that they live within,
Exactly.
their support structure. Someone can have a little bit of risk, but the situation they find themselves in their life can tip them over into an event that can be absolutely devastating for them. So that social aspects of support are also critically important for mental illness. And NIH research really spans the gamut from the chemicals in our brain all the way to, do you have a place to live, proper family support, someone to make sure that you get sleep at night, these things that can trigger someone over into a serious issue. And without that, all that stops. And then finally, last thing I'll say is, even with a delay in funding, this, I can't emphasize this enough, there are grants being canceled, but there's also funding that's not showing up for grants that we don't think are canceled, but the funding's just not getting out the door. And when you've got a program that's dependent on social support and people and
Right.
not only the laboratories, but also these networks, and you don't have the funding coming in, you can't keep going.
That's exactly the story that I heard when we were having this discussion back home in Minnesota. And on the one hand, there is so much encouragement to see how this continuum from prevention, early intervention, treatment, recovery, how well it works, but how complicated it is. Because you say sometimes it might be just finding the right med, but often it's much more complex than that. And then just the impact of having the rug pulled out from under you when you are in the middle of a treatment regimen funded in part by NIH, and that could be literally a life or death moment for you, because serious mental illness is a life-threatening disease. And so I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to just highlight this as as one of the many ways that these cuts are so hurtful, so damaging to the health of Americans.
Thank you. And Senator Merkley.
Thank you all very much. In these discussions, I really appreciate you all, Mr. Ibarra, for coming and sharing your story of living with ALS, and Dr. Saltzman of living with leukemia. And all of us have friends and family members who are suffering from various diseases, and makes us think about the different therapies that are emerging to tackle them. I wanted to mention three different things and get a response. The first is I visited Oregon Health Sciences University quite a few years ago, and they were working on, if I recall right, RNA-M vaccines. And it's my understanding that that basic research also really contributed to how quickly we developed vaccines for COVID-19. I guess I'll turn to one of you who might know that story and know if that's kind of in the ballpark, and how much worse would the death and disease been had we not done that basic research on those vaccines years earlier.
One might land with me, I guess. I'm very happy to address that. It's one of the triumphs of our public funding for research, and it's a great example of how the work that only NIH funds, nobody else is going to fund, is so critical. So mRNA, fascinating regulatory molecule in our body, had been studied for many decades to truly understand what this molecule can do before all of a sudden it was needed in the middle of a desperate situation to find a way to prevent death from COVID. The other thing I will illustrate is the way that has to do with the story is that a researcher working in HIV research in the NIH intramural program figured out a way to stabilize an mRNA protein so that you could actually make a vaccine. So that also shows how a completely different area of research could also be the key to unlocking something that the public needed in an emergency. It was absolutely life-saving.
Doctor, thank you. I wanted to mention two other situations. I have a couple of friends who have died of pancreatic cancer, and from the time of diagnosis till death was quite short. It kind of dramatically so. And there is work going on now at NIH facilities on early detection of pancreatic cancer. It seems to me that could be a massive lifesaver, and is that work promising, and should we allow any of that research to come to a stop?
Well, it's a tragic disease that kills far too many people and is actually increasing in incidence. And it's one where we're starting to make progress on many different fronts, new therapies. The Genome Project and the downstream benefits of the Genome Project have started us to be able to now have some thoughts of actually do early diagnosis when it might be at a curable stage instead of an incurable death sentence. So great example, and but boy, we are not there yet. This is one of those diseases where we're starting to see a glimmer of hope. Things are starting to come together, and we absolutely cannot let up.
So I'll give my last example here. Four of my friends have come down with melanoma in the last several years, and so much I'm just like, how can it be that common? But I hear words from them like immunotherapy and clonal therapy and ACT therapy, adaptive cell therapy. And I don't know that I have no idea what these things are, but I gather we have multiple emerging strategies to take on melanoma. In two of my friends' cases, they are free of disease, so that's a huge celebration. In one case, that friend has died. In a fourth case, still in the question mark stage, but multiple strategies, multiple universities, scientific institutions going forward to tackle this devastating skin cancer that spreads like crazy.
It was a very, very, very long road to getting what in some cases is now a cure for people with melanoma, and we're not there yet for everyone, but that is also an incredible success story. And I'll remind you all that our wonderful President Jimmy Carter was one of those great success stories from his melanoma, which first showed up in his brain. And immunotherapy was able to give him so many more years of precious life.
Thank you. I'll just close by saying thank you to all of you for contributing your expertise and to all the scientists across NIH, and how when grants are lost and our postgraduate scholars who are immersed in the laboratory have to go find a job selling real estate, we have lost a massive asset in knowledge that will reverberate to our medical detriment for a generation to come. We can't let that happen.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, and I want to start by thanking you, Senator Baldwin, and Senator Welch for convening us. Thank all of you for sharing your expertise and leadership here. I know my colleague from Maryland, Senator Alsobrooks, was here a little earlier, and we are proud to be the home of NIH, but especially proud of what NIH does to help develop treatments and cures for Americans and that benefit people around the world and make us the center for medical research around the world, with all its health benefits, but also with all its economic benefits. So appreciate all of you being here. I just got word as I was coming in that Doge is today at NIH. Wow. And they are sowing fear and disrupting operations. And so we're hearing from some of those folks who do that important work for our country as we speak. I wanted, Dr. Wharton, if you could speak to the issue of the next generation of scientists, especially medical researchers, because, you know, in the past 60 days, I've heard from a lot of the probationary employees who were fired, and a lot of them are probationary, we all know, not because they did anything wrong, but because they're new to the job. And they tend to be, in many cases, younger people who are just starting out. And they're excited about helping do this important research. Also NIH fellows whose positions were just terminated, right? So this is the next generation of medical researchers that are going to be essential for helping Americans address these challenges from diseases and help contribute to our economic strength. So could you just speak briefly, Dr. Wharton, to the importance of NIH and NIH grants to helping recruit that next generation, and what this would mean if the Trump administration Musk operations are allowed to continue?
Well, I can tell you undoubtedly that these cuts are very, very devastating, and they're very scary for young investigators, for students, whether they've been affected or not. Everyone is concerned. It takes a long time to become a scientist. It's a lot of school. It becomes a part of your identity. A lot of us study certain areas of research, like I study Alzheimer's disease for a reason, because it touched my family. So for a lot of us, we're personally vested in our work. I also just wanted to say that these funding terminations directly make worse what we have in science referred to as the leaky pipeline. And that is where young scientists in whom the NIH and everyone has already invested and spent significant energy and resources, these young scientists may leave research altogether because they're nervous. That we want to stay in our fields, but we also have to pay our mortgage. We have to raise our kids. Is this a viable path for us to go forward? So it's a very difficult time. I know, speaking to the grants that have been terminated, very detrimental. A lot of those are career development awards, which the purpose of those are to train the next generation of leaders. Also, awards that aren't necessarily that have not yet been terminated, they just the can keeps getting kicked down the road, and they haven't been able to be reviewed, and I'm not sure if they will.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I see the time is short. I want to thank also Dr. Saltzman and Mr. Barr for sharing your stories, and I have to imagine that terminating a clinical trial that's in progress is the opposite of efficiency. And there are many other issues, but I want to thank all of you, and I know my colleagues are up next. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Hassan.
Thank you very much, Senator Baldwin, and to you and Senator Welch for gathering us here today. Thank you to all of the witnesses or people who are providing their insights and perspectives to us today. In New Hampshire, Dartmouth Health and Dartmouth Medical Center together receive over $100 million in NIH research funding. They study everything from how to improve community-based primary care, especially in rural areas, to research done by the Dartmouth Cancer Center, which is one of the only NIH cancer centers in rural America. I was up at Dartmouth just last week, and I heard a wide range of concerns from researchers. I want to highlight a couple things before I ask some questions. One researcher I spoke with recounted to me that her project to prevent youth mental illness and youth suicide appears to be in jeopardy. Right before she was due to present a widely attended conference, grant officials from the Trump administration demanded to review her slides and then censored them so that she was prevented from showing her mental health data broken down by boys and girls. She was told she couldn't disaggregate any of the data anymore. She was also told that she could not use the term social determinants of health, which is, of course, a well-defined term that has been used for decades in health policy and medicine. So we're facing a youth mental health crisis in the United States, particularly among teenage girls, and yet President Trump is threatening to defund critical research and training and censoring the scientists who are doing this critical mental health work. Another scientist I spoke with just had 2 pilot grants terminated, even though these pilot grants were focused on how to improve primary care, especially in rural communities. Years of relationship building with primary care doctors were just cut off, taking away resources that support over 500 physicians in rural New England. The leaders of this administration claim that they want to prevent chronic disease and improve primary care, and yet Secretary Kennedy is taking away resources from the very physicians who are doing this work. So, a couple of questions. Dr. Bertagnolli, first of all, it's really good to see you again, and thank you for your work. Some of the researchers I met with last week were at Dartmouth Cancer Center, which, as you know, is one of 57 comprehensive cancer centers in the United States. With NIH funding, Dartmouth provides cutting-edge cancer treatment to more than 32,000 cancer patients annually. Despite the life-saving care that they provide, Dartmouth Cancer Center has seen a months-long delay of its NIH funding since President Trump took office. So, Doctor, can you talk about the work of comprehensive cancer centers and the types of patient care that NIH funding supports?
So comprehensive cancer centers are a crown jewel of our NIH, or certainly the NCI, because they have been around for many, many decades, and the idea is to take a comprehensive view of what cancer does, all the way from fundamental biology to delivery in the communities. Every comprehensive cancer center has to fulfill that full spectrum because we understand it has to be a virtuous cycle. The laboratory has to learn from the clinic, has to learn from what we now know, the community, because our influence is not just what we see in the doctor's office, but what we see in where we live and where we work has to be a part of everything we do if we're going to conquer cancer. And the comprehensive cancer centers are specially selected and resourced because they do it all. And we're very, very lucky to have them.
We are, and they are very, very worried about, again, not only their current research, but also the future of the pipeline that you speak of. Dr. Saltzman, you have the unique perspective of being both a medical provider and a patient. I recently heard from a constituent, Christine in Brentwood, New Hampshire, who has colon cancer and is currently receiving treatment through a clinical trial funded by NIH. While her clinical trial has not yet been shut down, she's heard from her doctors that the NIH is not allowing the team to hire the staff that they need to keep going, putting the future of her care, of course, in jeopardy. What are the implications for patients and their doctors if a clinical trial is cut off in the middle of a patient's course of treatment?
Well, it's terrible. I mean, it's life-threatening or end of life.
Yeah.
And I've taken part in many trials. One of the trials I was in was a compassionate care trial because I had run out of options.
Right.
And I was needing to get to a bone marrow transplant, but the only way to get me there was a trial of one, compassionate care.
Yeah.
If that had not been available, then I wouldn't be sitting here today talking with you. And my disease is chronic. It's like playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
So if I get to the end of the trial I'm on today and it's ended for me and there's nothing else to take over, then again, you know, as I've coined the phrase, I meet my expiration date.
Yeah.
But it's brutal.
Well, I appreciate your insights and your willingness to speak about it. Thank you, Senator Baldwin, and just to everybody here, thank you, and a particular thank you to Mr. Ibarra for your service, sir. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Next, we have Senator Durbin.
Thanks for having this hearing, and thank you all for being here. It was about 10 years ago when I went out to NIH and met with Francis Collins, and we talked about the good old days, and I recalled a time Ed Markey will remember when Senator Harkin and Senator Specter and a fellow named John Porter, a congressman from Illinois, decided to set out to double the NIH budget, and they did it. They did it. And I said to Dr. Collins, I wish I could promise the same thing. What can I do? He said, give us 5% real growth every year, and we will light up the scoreboard. We are so close in so many areas that if our researchers are confident that next year there's going to be as much and maybe a little more, they can continue their work, they'll stick with it. And when they stick with it, we get good results, ultimately. And I think that's been proven over and over again. I look back on that now, and we went from $30 billion a year to NIH, and 10 years later, we were at $48 billion. 60% increase. How do we do it? A bipartisan team of senators. It was, of course, Patty Murray. She's always there because she believes, as we do, how critical this is. But it also included Roy Blunt, conservative Republican, Missouri. I talked him into being part of the team, and we worked together for years. And Lamar Alexander, who was looking to find a way to help as well. So the four of us, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, put that kind of investment and made a difference in the lives of millions of people that I'll never know. What we're lacking now is, frankly, support from the other side of the aisle. We need a few Republicans who stand up and say, enough. Enough, Mr. Musk, enough Doge, enough this, enough that. People are going to die if we don't fund medical research, period. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's be very honest about this reality. I hope that we'll get a few of those Republicans who will do that. In the meantime, I want to say a word for Mr. Ibarra. Thank you for being here. Brian Wallach and Sandra Apravaya are friends of mine, and he is struggling with the same disease that you're fighting. I remember the day when Dr. Collins called me and said, we've just decided that our basic research in ALS has been misguided and really is not headed where we want it to. We're going to start a brand new chapter. That was a pretty bold thing for him to say, and some people would be afraid to say that much. But that's the kind of honesty you want in research. It all isn't going to be a home run. There's going to be strikeouts here and there. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Rivera, and thank you for your service to our country, what you see in terms of research for ALS.
Well, I feel that within my lifetime, we're going to make it livable. But we got to keep that funding going. I mean, we made so much progress already, and we're almost there. So why stop now and go backwards?
Thank you. Dr. Bertagnoli, I just have a couple minutes left here. I want to turn them back over to you. You worked with Dr. Collins over the years, and the kind of challenge he's set down for me and for other senators, I think really did make a difference at NIH.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will tell you that both Dr. Collins and I share the sentiment that everything we did at NIH was understanding how precious that support was. Absolutely precious, and had to be used to have people live longer and healthy lives. That really is the goal here.
I think about that moment, which many of us have faced and others have heard about over and over again, when the doctor says, and here's the diagnosis. And you go up and you say, is there anything we can do? Is there a medicine? Is there a surgery? Is there a treatment? And you pray to God that some researcher at NIH found a breakthrough that's going to give you or someone you love a chance. That's what this issue is all about. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Senator Baldwin, and thank you to this very distinguished panel for being here. I just want to take a few minutes to go through how the illegal executive orders and the, I call it doggy, rampage of the muskrats through our public agencies is playing out in Rhode Island. And I'll mention a termination, and I'll mention what looks like a violation of the TRO, and I'll mention just stupid delay and inefficiency. The termination is of a grant to Brown University's mental health research. The grant was for 3 years of research into how a particular counseling method provided relief and symptom reduction for LGBTQ folks suffering from depression and anxiety. 3-year grant. There's now 6 months left. And they suddenly, out of no place, got a notice that the grant was just terminated. I'm married to a marine scientist. I'm a lawyer, but I know a little bit about how research works. And when you've put together a research plan with a 3-year duration and suddenly the data collection is interrupted, you've compromised the research. I don't want to say that the 2.5 years of work has to be thrown out now, but it's certainly been compromised. All to make some unimaginable point about how research into mental health issues can be improved in the LGBTQ community is not, for some reason, acceptable to Trump, MAGA, and the muskrats. So that's example one. Example two, again involving the LGBTQ community, relates to cancer research. There's a national LGBTQ plus cancer action network, and there is a grant going out to work with LGBTQ cancer survivors. And that funding has been stopped. And it seems that's in plain violation of the temporary restraining order that is in place. One thing that I'll ask each of you to do is, if you become aware of where funding is stopped, to let us know, because there are these court orders that are out there. And to fake compliance with the court orders, what the Trump administration is doing is retreating into a fog bank of dissimulation and confusion, where they won't have somebody say, no, that funding is blocked, and make them subject to a contempt citation for directly and flagrantly violating the order. Instead, they don't answer the emails, they don't answer the phone calls, they give bland and vague answers, they give bland and vague reassurances, and in some cases, they even say, your funding is fine, and then it never comes. So the acid test is, are the funds actually moving? And we need to know when they're jammed, because you can't believe anything that the Trump administration tells you about the progress of the funds unless the funds are actually flowing. So I think this is a TRO violation, and I think there are plenty of them, so please help us with that. The last is that Brown, and what used to be Lifespan and is now Brown Health, runs an Institute of Brain Science. It's one of the premier brain science research places in the country. They're doing research in particular on Alzheimer's, which, as you all know, is threatening to break our public health system if we can't find a cure for it, and it continues to grow and begins to burden Medicare and Medicaid even more than it is. And what they are finding is that even in this otherwise non-controversial program that looks into Alzheimer's at one of the top brain research facilities in the world, they're stalled and jammed up because they can't get the regular grant applications and the process moved timely through the system. So if this is Doggy's version of efficiency, I'm not seeing it. It's not efficient to compromise 2.5 years of research just because somebody doesn't want to fund LGBTQ research. It's not efficient to slow down world-class brain research just because you like to jam up the gears of stuff. And it certainly doesn't make efficiency sense to be in violation of a court order, because sooner or later that ends up in litigation and fines and costs and all of the things that happen when you get into the habit of violating court orders. So thank you for being here. Again, please be on alert that when the funding isn't flowing, we need to know that, because you can't believe what you're told about the funding. You have to actually find out whether it's flowing or not.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Thank you. I want to really thank Senators Baldwin and Welch and our panelists all for being here, participating in this critically important forum. Information, data, real stories to put a face on the impact of what is happening are some of our most powerful tools to fight back against the Trump administration indiscriminate and cruel cuts to life-saving research and care. Because one thing we all know for sure, that disease and diagnosis, a diagnosis can change your life in an instant. In an instant, your world is turned upside down, and we must continue to fight for cures. This is not a political issue. This is a human issue, and it affects every single one of us and the ones that we love. I'm going to turn to veterans, because Nevada's home to nearly 250,000 veterans. They've served our country proudly. They deserve all the resources available to them, including improved access to health care. However, the devastating cuts to NIH are leaving our veterans without that critical research that supports medical assistance provided to service members and veterans through the Department of Defense and the VA. So, Mr. Ibarra, we know that the thousands of veterans rely on federal health care programs directly supported by NIH research grants and funding. Can you talk a little bit about the ALS grants funded by NIH that are important to patients like you and the impact of these cuts?
Thank you, Senator. I'm not sure about the specific grants that NIH funds to the VA, but I'm very aware, like the grants for adapting your home for accessibility. Well, my understanding is they got rid of all the agents that manage the grants. And I'm in the process at this point of having to update my home. And now there are no agents to help.
Just leaving you high and dry.
Absolutely.
Leaving you high and dry. Well, Mr. Johnson, or Dr. Johnson, excuse me, I'm going to turn to you, given your role as research and director of Alzheimer's disease research, and Alzheimer's has touched my family's life. Can you speak to the impact on our veterans? We eliminate the funding for dementia-related programs.
The Alzheimer's disease affects people of all political ideologies. It affects all of us, whether they're from urban or rural settings. It's a devastating disease. Our work with veterans is especially important. The Veterans Administration has its own R&D program. And lately, they've been working very closely with NIH in order to have a coordinated response to improve veterans' care and to conduct research with veterans, on veterans, to understand their particular risk. So this is an important time. We need to sustain that kind of momentum that that NIH has put into place. I'd like to see that continue.
Thank you. I want to talk about the canceled NIH grants that focus on improvement for maternal health outcomes, because some of the latest grants to be canceled by the Trump administration, they focused on areas like improving outcomes for, like I said, maternal health, fetal health. The U.S. continues to have the highest rate, sadly, of maternal mortality among developed nations. Yet grants focusing on improving these outcomes for underserved populations, those most at risk, are deemed not to be aligned with current priorities. Again, this is a human issue, not a political issue. So, Dr. Bertinoli, when researching a critical issue such as maternal mortality, how important is it to look at different populations, urban and rural, all around this country, every single state? Talk to us a little bit about that, and what interventions will best improve the outcomes.
Yes, thank you, Senator. You're addressing an incredibly important issue, and that is of health disparities. We cannot ignore that there are counties in every state and counties across our nation where it is so clear there is a persistent problem with poorer outcomes for all kinds of health issues. The ones that are the easiest and clearest we know of are maternal and fetal health being one of them. But, there are many others. And without targeting those particular populations to understand the reasons behind the disparities, how can we ever even begin to overcome them? I'll give you another statistic I know really well. If you look in the difference for women, I'll just pick out women, of the worst counties in the nation to the best counties in the nation, in the worst counties of the nation, women have a 900 times higher risk of dying from cancer than in counties that are the best.
Oh my, well, I just want to thank you. My time is up, but I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for becoming scientists. It's not easy. Thank you for caring and digging into this, because the lives that you inspire and change and save, it's really amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you very much. NIH is really the National Institutes of Hope. Hope that research, which is medicine's field of dreams, will make the breakthroughs that give hope to families that that disease that's been running through their families for generations will be cured. That's what NIH does. My mother had Alzheimer's. She was a brilliant woman. My grandmother died when she was 17, so she had to raise her 3 younger sisters. She could do calculus at the kitchen table, even though she never had it. For her sons, she had me at 39 and my brothers at 40, the twins. So when she got Alzheimer's, my father, who's a milkman, he just said, "Eddie, it was an honor that your mother married me. She's never going to step foot in a nursing home." So at age 80, 82, 84, 86, 88, 90, she was in our living room. No one was touching my mother except her family. We have 7 million people with Alzheimer's in America right now. And it's 7 million stories, the same story, with someone in the family who has to take care of them. By the time all of the baby boomers have retired, 15 million people are going to have Alzheimer's. And there'll be 15 million other people in those families who take care of them, 30 million people, 10% of our country, Alzheimer's. I founded the Alzheimer's Caucus in 1999. In 2014, Senator Collins and I, we passed a very important bill. That bill said, as you know, Doctor, that NIH has to tell the appropriators each year, how much money do you need to find the cure for Alzheimer's by the year 2025? And it rose from 560 million a year to 3.8 million, to 3.8 billion a year last year. We still haven't found the cure. So Senator Collins and I, we reauthorized it last year out to 2035 to have NIH tell the appropriators, how much money do you need to find the cure for Alzheimer's? So far we've spent 25 billion the first 10 years. It'll probably be 50 billion if we get the money, because failure is not an option with Alzheimer's. Last year, the United States spent $236 billion on Medicare and Medicare for Alzheimer's patients. 70% of people in nursing homes are on Medicaid, and half of them have Alzheimer's. We call them grandma and grandpa. And what I'm being told by Alzheimer's researchers all across this country is that they can't hold on to this next generation. They can't promise them a job next year or the year after. And these young generation of trainees, they're walking away. So how serious is that, Dr. Bertinelli? How serious is that as a problem in our country if these researchers walk away and Alzheimer's is left uncured?
It's incredibly serious, and let me tell you how, one little incident, one event that happened that tells me I definitely know how serious it is. We have benefited tremendously from consistent increases in NIH funding, and what that has done is brought the best and the brightest young people into the work that NIH does. But there was one blip. It was the sequester. And when we look at what happened during the sequester to the number of young people who came into our pipeline for biomedical research, we sometimes refer to it as the NIH, we lost a generation just because of the sequester. Now, how trivial does that seem right now, really, compared to what we're facing today? So I think that's proof that even though we're a couple months into this, what we're seeing today is going to have permanent and lasting damage, and that's what I'm very, very worried about.
I am just, I'm outraged that this could even be considered by the Trump administration to slash these programs, to abandon all of these young researchers who want to dedicate their life to finding the cure for Alzheimer's. It is an absolute disgrace. It's a tragedy that this is happening right now, because they can go and write hedge fund algorithms. They can move to other countries and do this research. They want to do it here, and they want to be mentored by the young geniuses of the preceding generation who are now ready to pass the torch. So, Dr. Wharton, could you tell me what your reaction is when you hear about these cuts to Alzheimer's research?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm old enough to remember when the sequestration happened. I was in training at the time, and I remember where I was sitting. I remember everything that happened. I also remember that is the time when I was waiting on the decision whether or not I was going to receive a training grant, which was my transition from postdoctoral to my independent, what I was hoping would be my independent career. Because it was so delayed, I actually was handed my 2 weeks notice. And so I owned a home at the time. I had no idea that this was happening. I was applying everywhere. I applied as an editor. Nobody wants to hire someone that just got a PhD. I could not get a job at Home Depot. And I was trying everything, but everything was sort of in turmoil. Luckily, my award was funded, and I was able to go on with my career, but that was decided by about 15 people in a room where they review grants in a study section, probably discussed for about 10 minutes, and that was such a pivotal time. I will also say that of all of us that were in these trainings, again, fostered and funded by the NIA to go to these workshops where they're giving us, resources for who they think is going to be next. I am one of 2 women that I know went to some of these workshops. So we lost a ton of people in general, but we lost a lot of women. I know one other woman in my cohort who's still doing this.
So
Thank you.
thank you for what you do. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight for all of those young researchers who want to find the cure for Alzheimer's, for cancer, for diabetes, for Parkinson's, for all of those diseases, which send fear into the hearts of people when they hear it once again has risen in their family. Thank you all for what you do. We will fight for you.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, Senator Baldwin, Senator Welch. I'm back. I was here earlier and heard the openings. And I want to thank you for just the incredible work you're doing in standing up for the National Institute of Health. I've actually found it at home to be one of the most gut-wrenching things for our constituents. I have done events with Senator Smith with people who are in the middle of clinical trials that are NIH-sponsored, who actually are in remission because of that. In Rochester, you know, a place where all the women are strong, the men are good-looking, and all the medical researchers are above average in the state of Minnesota. I was just there at the University of Minnesota, which obviously does work with Mayo Clinic. And I guess my first question of you, Dr. Bertagnolli, and thank you so much for the work you've done, is when you think about this moment we are in time, and this was just playing off what Senator Markey said, we're at this cusp of great medical discovery for a combination of the hard work of the researchers, you, Dr. Wharton, so many others, and then the mapping of the human genome and what we've seen with rare diseases and the like, where we're finally getting treatments for things, and then AI and the potential, if we do it right, to get at those things. And like you, I'm a cancer survivor. You know, what might have been a death sentence turns into a lumpectomy and radiation, and you don't even have to go to chemo. That was all because of research, right? The fact that I could get that done and then come on a commercial flight that night and vote the next morning, don't recommend to anyone. Those things are happening now. So could you talk about this cusp of research that we're on right now that we may lose with these cuts and lose American leadership?
So we can point to diseases just in my career time that were an absolute death sentence that can now be cured. We talked about something a little earlier in this. And we can also point to some diseases right now, Alzheimer's, ALS, that pancreatic cancer, that there are cracks in the dam here. I mean, we're not done. We're not anywhere close to being done, but there are, for the first time ever, you see some truly promising directions. These are solid directions. Great, really important clues that we just need to run with.
Exactly.
And that's where we are now. And then you can magnify that so many times. The Brain Initiative, what it's done just for our understanding of the human brain is fascinating. And then finally, you talked about AI. AI is going to transform medicine, but it sure as heck is not going to do it the right way unless it is shepherded.
Exactly.
Very carefully shepherded by people who actually take care of patients, I believe.
Very good.
And so we need that.
Maybe you can handle this, Dr. Johnson or anyone. It's the indirect cost issue with NIH. It appears as though Senator Warren is also going to ask you about this. So, just having seen and talked to a bunch of the researchers about how these what funds were frozen and what that indirect cost really is, and actually saw some of it at the University of Minnesota, right? Some of the equipment and things that need to be funded. Maybe just from a practical perspective, you could enlighten us on what that means.
Yeah, these are dollars, the facilities and administrative dollars that fund major instruments like MRI scanners, something called a cyclotron, which helps us create radioactive medicine that we use on a near daily basis. Big instruments like that, multi-million-dollar instruments, buildings, electricity. These are the things that we use those dollars for, those facilities dollars. The administrative side of those, keeping people safe, having a system in place that allows us to be responsible for those taxpayer dollars that we're spending, following the regulations and ensuring that compliance, that's what those dollars are for, so that we can conduct research the right way.
Very good. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Senator Warren.
So I apologize, Senator Klobuchar. I'm known as an active listener.
I've never seen anyone so excited about a question about indirect costs, so.
Yeah, and I am so happy to be here with all of you today. I want to thank Senator Baldwin and Senator Welch for pulling us together for this hearing. And I want to thank all of you for the work you do, for showing up and testifying. I'm deeply grateful that you do this. For those of us who have to come late because we were trying to cover other hearings as well and other things going on, I want to apologize. We probably are overlapping each other and asking you some of the same questions over and over, but we want to build a really strong record here because we want to be able to use what you say as part of our efforts to fight for you to be able to continue to do the work that you do. So let me just start out. NIH is the biggest funder of biomedical research in the entire world. So if you're not doing it, a lot of it just isn't going to get done. As I understand it, for every dollar that we spend at NIH, you're producing about $2.56 in economic activity. So it's a good investment because we want to be healthier, but it's also just a good investment financially, measured in the short run, an even better investment in the long run when we look at diseases like Alzheimer's that are currently running us over, $200 billion a year. We need to put the money into research. It just makes economic sense to do this. But now co-presidents Trump and Musk are just plowing through budget after budget, and NIH is in their sights. Co-President Musk wants to take a chainsaw to NIH, and I really do want to come back for just a moment to this question about indirect costs. He has simply waved his chainsaw and announced that indirect costs will be cut in half. Now, you've described to Senator Klobuchar just a little bit about what they are, but just say a word for me about what that will mean then. Will you somehow be able to get the test tubes and the electricity at half price because Elon Musk decided to cut your budget for indirect costs in half? Who would like to do that? Dr. Johnson?
Sure. These are dollars that the university uses to support research, all those intangibles. So this is really going to put into question the university's ability to support these projects that they've committed to and that NIH has funded through peer review. It's going to put the feasibility of all those projects in jeopardy.
So this is really about shutting down research. You just got to contract the number of projects that actually get studied. And that either means lengthening the time it's going to take before we make the breakthroughs, or picking areas where you just say, sorry, diabetes, you didn't make the list, or whichever ones have to be cut out. Is that a fair description, Dr. Bertinelli?
It's fair, and another point I want to bring up is that the universities don't just arbitrarily get some indirect cost rate, It is negotiated with them. They have to justify it on a very frequent basis. Exactly how did you spend this money, and was it absolutely necessary? Right. So it is very carefully watched to make sure that it's really needed to support the research that university is doing.
So let me focus on the carefully watched part of this. I sat there at the State of the Union and listened to the president talk about the millions of dollars spent on transgender mice. Did you hear that?
I
did.
did.
Know what he probably was talking about? The millions of dollars? Anyone? Transgenic mice?
Yeah, I can assure you that NIH has never funded transgender mice.
Mice.
Yes.
But is it possible that NIH has funded the development of transgenic mice?
Correct.
Right, because what are transgenic mice used for?
So they're used to introduce particular mutations, particular characteristics in an animal model that mimics, that can help us develop a real living model for a disease to be able to develop new treatments and prevention approaches.
So mice, for example, that might be particularly susceptible to developing cancer, bred that way generation after generation after generation, so you can run your tests to see if your tests really are effective treatments for cancer. Is that a fair description?
Absolutely, but also to understand what just basic biology, what does this gene do? So you mutate it and put it in a mouse and see what happens to the mouse. You can
Okay,
understand what
so
the gene does.
Basic scientific research here. And when Co-President Musk tells everyone who has the contract to work on something like transgenic mice to stop working immediately, what happens to those mice?
I can't tell you. I
Well,
think
you're a doctor. You're going to figure this one out. If you don't feed them and you don't water them, what happens to the mice?
the mice will not survive
The mice will not
unless they
survive.
turn them loose, and then maybe good luck.
And that's a movie, I think, that goes from there. But what happens to the millions of dollars we invested for this long pipeline to get us to a place where we could test out what these genes mean, what kinds of treatments for cancer works best? What happens to all of that effort put in to those transgenic mice?
It's a big waste of resources, a big waste of opportunity.
Okay,
and
does not sound like efficiency to me to get rid of them. I just want to say again, thank you for all that you do. We cannot afford to lose a generation of scientific breakthroughs. We cannot afford to lose a generation of scientists. We need to restore the cuts to NIH, and we need to expand the funding and support for medical research across the board. Thank you all for being here, and you really do have a group of fighters on your side. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Senators Baldwin and Welch, for hosting this roundtable today and the opportunity to hear from each of our panelists who are testifying. Thank you all very much for being here. I want to add Dr. Bertagnoli to the list of breakthroughs that NIH is on the cusp of, and that breakthrough is type 1 diabetes. And we know that that's one of the most expensive chronic diseases, just like Alzheimer's, and it's growing in terms of the number of people who are affected, and we are this close to a cure. And so, as all of my colleagues have said, there is so much that's going to be lost because of the short-sightedness and the ignorance of this administration and what they're doing. I want to pick up on the indirect cost issue because that's one that affects my state of New Hampshire. And when we're talking about capping indirect costs at 15%, in New Hampshire, just the top 3 NIH awardees would lose nearly $50 million in federal funding should indirect costs be capped. And in a small state like New Hampshire, that is a whole lot of money. It's a lot of money anywhere, but it would affect 335 grants, nearly 2,000 jobs across the state, including at Dartmouth College and Dartmouth Medical Center, which is one of the premier research institutions in the entire country. They alone would lose $38 million in federal funds, and those, just like at NIH, are dollars that fund cures for cancer, for Alzheimer's, for diabetes, and this would hurt patients and our competitiveness. And Dr. Johnson, I know you did your postdoctoral work at Dartmouth Medical Center. Can you talk about your time at Dartmouth Health, what drew you to that rural part of New Hampshire, and what the NIH funding meant for your work as a postdoctoral fellow?
Dartmouth was an amazing place. It was a place to thrive and learn as a scientist, just life transforming for me. I received a individual postdoctoral fellowship there from NIH, my first NIH grant back in 1996, I think it was, 97. So these are the kinds of experiences that we need young researchers to have, to learn from the best of the best and be able to carry that forward and have successful careers. The way things are going now, we're going to lose that pipeline. It's going to be an even leakier pipeline because of the uncertainty that we're currently experiencing.
And just to follow up on that, because one of the particular challenges that we know we have with healthcare in this country is the rural parts of our country where access to healthcare is less available, where people have to travel farther, and in small towns like Lebanon and Hanover in rural New Hampshire, Dartmouth Health makes a huge difference in the lives of the people of that area and of the whole state. But it also has an impact on the economics of the state and the region. And I don't know, Dr. Bertagnoli, if you would like to add, or even you, Dr. Johnson, add to what you see in terms of the investments that NIH makes in our communities and what a difference that makes, not just for the people who benefit from the research, but the spillover, the economic spillover that benefits the entire area.
So I can say a couple of things. First of all, as we've heard, people who have access to research do better. Doctors and clinicians who participate in research as being research, physicians are better doctors and clinicians, and communities that have research within them, even if they're remote, get much better health care. And then last of all, and I think this is probably even the most important, we need to learn from those communities, because curing type 1 diabetes in the middle of Manhattan just might be really different than curing even something that sounds as, therapy-oriented. Type 1 diabetes in Lebanon, New Hampshire, or Lebanon's pretty, where I come from, that's the big city, I'll just tell you. I grew up in the middle of Wyoming. It's a really rural place. But do you see what I mean?
It's not a big city, but
You get it. But we need, not only that, the rest of us need those communities as well.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else would like to add to that. Well, thank you all very much for being here today and for what you're doing. We have a lot of work to do, and hopefully knowledge rather than ignorance will prevail in the country and in the administration. I can remember being in graduate school at the University of Mississippi, and one of the slogans over the post office on the university campus was, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And it's a reminder that we should all be thinking about these days. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We're coming towards the end here. And I just want to, number one, I want to ask you, Mr. Barrett, or I want to say to your son, he's not your only champion. You have all of me and my colleagues who are going to be your champion. What do you pay for medication? What does that cost you?
Well, at the VA, I pay nothing.
I like the
So,
sound of that.
Yeah, I'd like to keep it that way.
And we'd like to have the VA opportunity available to all Americans so they are not in incredible jeopardy if they have to have high expensive drugs. I just want to sum up, because everyone's asked the questions. First of all, for Senator Baldwin and I as conveners, we've been here from beginning to end. And as you see from my colleagues, oftentimes they're in two different places at once, and they manage that, but not three, so it's coming and going. It's been such a pleasure for me to be here from beginning to end and to hear each of your testimonies and to hear the questions from my colleagues. And just summing it up, it's inspiring. What work each of you has done could not be done without other people having done that work before you. And there's humility in your presentation, even though all of you are incredibly accomplished. And it's an appreciation that there's a commitment that a society makes to the betterment of people who come after. And that in order for that to be successful and sustainable, you have to build institutions like the National Institute of Health that work with other collaborators in other institutions, and also have that commitment to nurture young people who want to go into the work that you're doing for the same reasons. They want to make this a better country. They want to find cures for cancer. They want to find cures for Alzheimer's. And what's so astonishing to me, and this is the opposite of inspiring, is that you could have a government that is so cavalier that it destroys that infrastructure. That doesn't get put together overnight. And, you know, the so-called plan to save money, there is not a single person here who is against the effort to try to figure out how what it is that we're doing can be done better and more efficiently. But that means that you look at what you're doing, you look at how you're doing it, you assess what you're trying to accomplish, and then you make a plan in order to do it in a better way. This so-called effort to cut is a fiction. It's not on the level. It's really about destroying. And that is heartbreaking to me. It's heartbreaking to me because of those cures that are within reach that now will be in the distant over the horizon. It's discouraging to all Americans who want to put the effort into doing what you're doing. And you can think of students who were in your are in the position you were in years ago. And it's terrible for me that this country that is so built on hope and it's so built on aspiration, that we're destroying the institutions that are essential to help those who are willing to work hard to achieve a goal, not just about themselves, but others. We're taking that away. So I have to say that we are all going to be fighters. Your 10-year-old son, who gave, I must admit, a pretty good speech on behalf of his dad, has inspired those of us in the United States Senate to stand up for him and for you and for all of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. We've got a fight on our hands, and we're in it.
I have a final question before we wrap up the hearing, and it's for you, Dr. Saltzman. I have heard, not frequently, but occasionally, people say that NIH, and maybe particularly the National Cancer Institute, could somehow absorb these crippling cuts that the Trump administration is imposing because the private sector somehow will step in to fill the void. They suggest, for example, that advocacy organizations that are 501c3s and raise money for research could step in and fill the void. They suggest that maybe pharmaceutical companies that might stand to achieve big profits should they find a breakthrough could fill the gap. Because you are not only somebody who speaks from experience battling leukemia, but as a doctor, but also as an organizational lead with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, I'd like to hear from you if NCI Research, the National Cancer Institute, I don't like using abbreviations when I can avoid it. So if the National Cancer Institute funding is cut, do you think industry or nonprofit organizations can fund that research? And will it be able to replace our federal government spending on cancer research?
Well, thank you for that question. I cannot say what will happen in the pharmaceutical space. But nonprofit foundations, like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society that have supported me and advanced research, they cannot do what NIH does. The scale, the scope, the sustained investment provided by NIH is unmatched, and it's what's made my survival possible. Rounded figures that I know are that NCI funding is about 10 times more than a large single nonprofit, and it's unlikely that a nonprofit can make that up. The impact to research will be less. Young investigators, as we heard, will leave academia, and many therapeutics for cancers will not make it to FDA approvals. I think fundraising at a nonprofit, I worked for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for a little while. It's really challenging. And, they can make grants of, it seems like a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars a year, but it won't make up for what's lost.
Thank you. I want to, again, sincerely thank all of our panelists today who have joined us and advocates who are here and joining us virtually. I understand there was quite a virtual audience today who joined us. We organized this forum today because of what we are seeing at the NIH, the upending of truly life-saving research and putting treatments and cures further out of reach for millions of Americans. It is simply indefensible, and it is cruel. You have all helped shed light on what cutting and delaying funding, terminating grants, firing NIH staff, and creating completely unnecessary chaos and confusion means for our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors. Millions of Americans turn to the NIH for hope and are counting on the National Institutes for Health for the next breakthrough. And as you've heard from my colleagues, we are not going to stand idly by as this administration tries to gut its funding for tax cuts for the rich. We are fighting by your side. Thank you again for being here. And with that, I call the end to this forum.